I'm sorry, but you can catch us the next time. Probably the biggest news that I share was, and I'll put out an email after our meeting today, is that Ken has made a decision to retire or step down from his position as executive director early next year. So we're looking at sometime in the first quarter, and it's my pleasure to announce John Cunningham will be taking over as the executive director. Ken and John are working on a transition plan, and my hope is to keep Ken involved on a different scale than he's been, but. That's probably one of the biggest news items I have for you today. Any questions on that? Perfect. Aaron, I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk with Aaron in a little bit, and I'm going to kick it over to Ken for right now.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. So, folks, I'm going to spend some time talking in place of Eric's on some of the issues, the fallout, not the fallout, but the challenges now with the federal shutdown. As you know, Eric's cannot join us today because he's not allowed to work during this time. He can't answer emails, phone calls, be in the office, any of that. The same thing goes for all but a critical part of the staff at NFA. They have a couple of essential workers to maintain the facilities. They have a couple of administrative people just there to field emergency calls and deal with those issues. But by and large, the campus is shut down. So all of the activities that the National Fire Academy and the U.S. Fire Administrator's Office would do for us that require administrative support, clerical support, those things are not going to happen. They will have to wait until the budget is settled and the government reopens. Regarding on-campus classes, notifications have gone out to folks who were enrolled that the campus is closed. And as we get further out into next week, they're waiting until, let's see, I think they're waiting until Monday or Tuesday of next week because Virginia, Delaware, and Mass have weekends that are scheduled to start in a week. And they're waiting until Monday of next week to make the call based on the status of the budget deliberations and the opening of the federal government. But the Fire Academy will then reach out to folks directly to give them the news of whether it's canceled or not. So, but again, everything revolves around if they are able to get a budget and reopen the federal offices. If you are a state that's hosting an NFA class past November 12th, you should still advertise those classes and keep the students enrolled. The hope is by November 12th, the shutdown is resolved, and then NFA can be there to support the program. If it is not shut down, the class will not be able to be delivered because those classes after November 12th are funded through FY26. And because of that, they can't take place until the Academy is back up and running. The EFO Symposium is in the same category as the Massachusetts, Virginia, and Delaware State Weekend, that they will be making a call on that next Monday or Tuesday and then notifying attendees who have registered directly. So that'll be next week. All the FEMA grants have been awarded for AFG, SAFER, State Fire Training, Fire Prevention, and Safety. There were some questions about the awards being updated on the webpage. Obviously, during the shutdown, there's nobody there to update the webpage, so it's not going to happen during that time. But the other thing they're waiting for is for the agencies to accept the award and respond back to the program office. Again, there's nobody there. But when all of that is able to happen and be collected and assembled into a final report, then the goal is for that to be posted on the FEMA grants page and to be able to share that information. But that's not happening now. If you're conducting state fire training grant funded activities and assistance to firefighter grant funded activities, continue to send in the reports even though there's a shutdown. That way, the reports will be in the inbox of the agency when they do reopen, and they'll be able to process it. So the suggestion is do not hold on those until the academy and the other program offices reopen. Send those in now to get them in the queue and to be in the inbox. So I'll pause for a minute and see if anybody has any questions relative to the federal shutdown and the impact on NFA or anything else that I can try and address now. So I'll pause for a minute for anybody else's question. All right. Not hearing any, what I'd like to do is to introduce Aaron Magruder. Aaron is going to be doing a presentation for us today about intergenerational differences and how it affects the fire service and the impact for state fire training academies. Many of us know Aaron from her work not only with state training academies for the past 10 years, but also her involvement with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors and the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation and other organizations. So Aaron, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Always helps to unmute. Thank you, Ken.
There,
Thanks for inviting me to talk about this topic today. This is one that's a supporting topic in my doctoral research, and it's one that I find kind of fun to talk about. This is my doctoral research is in adult learning with an emphasis on educational psychology. And one of the things I've learned in this process is I don't like lectures. So today is a discussion. And as we move forward, you're going to see opportunities for you folks to talk. And one of the things I would really appreciate is interject at any time. I'd like this to be a discussion so you guys are getting something meaningful out of this. Of course, every PowerPoint presentation needs to have an objective slide. So my generic goal for today is that we're going to discuss the concept of generations, how that concept has evolved, the impact it has us on the fire service, and how we might be able to integrate our folks better for better outcomes. Now, again, I want this to be specific to your needs. So unmute, interject, refer in whenever you have the opportunity or you have relevance on that. So first opportunity to practice that skill. These were my objectives coming into planning this session today. What are yours? So again, please take the chance, unmute, tell me when we talk about generations, why does this concept pique your interest? Or why are you spending your time, other than just being obligated to be in this meeting, why are you paying attention to this topic?
Because our students are our priority, and we frequently teach multi-generational students in the same programs or across our programs. So it's important that we understand our audience.
Okay, so we have a broad range of attendees. What's the real life problem that comes from that? What's the issue we're trying to solve?
I think that everybody has different expectations when they walk into a class, and and I should also add that part of the challenge is our staff, because we have younger and younger people, at least they get younger in my mind, and their style of learning may be different than what traditionally has been there. And I have to not only communicate with our students, but I have to communicate with our staff that they have to adjust their approach and their thinking to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of explaining it. To oversimplify what I see as the problem is we in leadership have to be translators. We have to translate between this broad swath of experiences and expectations. I think you said that perfectly. But also everybody who walks in the door has to become that translator as well. It's not just the leaders, it's not just the followers. It's building that psychologically safe cooperative culture where this doesn't just, it's not a problem we solve every 20 years. It's a problem we readdress on a daily basis. So to kick that off, what is a generation to you? How do you
So,
guys,
Aaron,
go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ken. To me, at one point in my career, generation was old folk. And
Old
I
folks?
only saw, yeah, old folk. I only saw that as the older generation versus me, the younger generation. Now I've got
Hmm.
to admit, the mirrors kind of changed, and but now I realize that generation really means almost a group of people who came, um, who are born within a certain period and have tendencies that sometimes alter what we think re- is constitutes who we are and the way we look at things. So I see it truthfully, I see it very differently now.
Okay. So when you say how you used to see it, people born in a certain time period, what was that? What was that distance? What was that broth of that time period?
Oh well, I remember my grandfather born in 1898 and him
Hmm.
who lived with us talking about what he experienced, and then my parents born in the 1920s versus me born in 53 and living through the Cold War and all of those things and how they informed us. That was pretty much, how I looked back. That was my reference point was born before 1900, early 1900s, and then the mid 1900s.
That's pretty appropriate. Does anybody else have a take when you think generation? What's the swath of years you think about?
When I was a new firefighter, it was those guys that were in their 40s.
A
I
little
hate to
triggering
say that,
now.
and now I'm way past that. So again, I think it's a bit of a sliding scale. I don't feel that I'm old. I don't feel that I'm beyond my 40s and 50s and closer to my 70s than I should. But I think that it was the perception of what I thought I could do and what I can do and what they could do and what they can do.
Yeah. So our experiences are very relative in that concept. I hate to admit it, there's a large subset of my generational cohort that if somebody says, hey, 30 years ago, we think 1970. For some reason, our brain is stuck in the 2000s, and 30 years ago was 1970 when we weren't even born yet. And we know that's an egregiously wrong perception. So, as we talk about generations, one of the ground rules that this illustrates that we need to follow is generations is a discussion of a stereotype. And stereotypes are a collective experience of people, um, but it's describing a group of people. Stereotypes do not specify individuals, they don't define individuals. So even though we're going to learn how to kind of assess some of the generational influences, they help us give our folks grace. They help us understand where our folks are coming from. They help us negotiate miscommunications. They aren't actionable labels for individuals. Um, in generational research, we often refer to 20 years as the band each cohort falls within, and you kind of loosely see this. The generations get a little tighter over time as we move from the 1900s to current day. And there's a couple different reasons for that, which we're going to discuss. But yeah, a lot of us think, 40 is old. I still think 40 is really old until I look at my driver's license and go, wow, 40 is not that old anymore. So moving past that, looking at this generations, there's no empirical this year to this generation. There's no empirical this label for this generation. But what you see on the screen is very commonly accepted in the generations discussion. Looking at this chart, knowing that we all probably are older than we feel, what generation is the oldest generation still in our fire service? What do you think?
I think if you look at the rural fire service, you've got some baby boomers that are still hanging out.
Definitely some baby boomers. Anybody older than baby boomers?
Aaron, yeah, I know several that are from the silent generation still in it.
Yeah. And looking at line of duty death reports where we see that single tender tanker, whatever you refer to it in your locality, that single apparatus returning from the call overturned. We sometimes still see folks in the 80s or the older 80s who are still running these calls. I think, Greg, you hit on the head perfectly. Our rural volunteers are still in that older demographic. And we have a lot of departments that are entirely in that baby boomer, elder baby boomer, silent generation demographic at all as well. So when we look at the span, as Jim and Ken, you guys referred to earlier, where's the entry point? What generation is currently in our training academies?
All of them. Silent.
Very, yeah, very, very closely. We are already reaching into the Generation Alpha. For folks who maybe have engagement with high school programs or doing some junior cadet stuff, we are already working with Generation Alpha in the fire service. So we have a very broad swath. Now, for reference, what I find entertaining is the generational concepts are evolving over time as our life expectancy gets longer and as we start defining periods in life expectancy. You mentioned earlier, Ken, about, pre-1900s. Well, prior to the Civil War, we really didn't delineate between child and adults. And this is really a big point when you're talking andragogy and pedagogy and the history of that. But it was until the American Civil War that we started considering somebody in adult status. It wasn't until Generation X that we started referring to using that term teenager. This was an evolution of our persona in America. And something that's been cropping up in recent years in higher education is this term of emerging adults. What do you guys know about that term, emerging adults? How does that relate to you? Have you heard it before?
I've not heard that.
Okay. So the term of emerging adults is that period where our culture is much less industrious. Our culture is much less laborious. Our teenagers typically are now spending more time on their phones, in their homes, with their peer group. Emergent adults is this kind of the butterfly coming from the chrysalis of they're no longer listening to their parents. They're no longer that full-on teenager. It's more that 17 to 25 to 28-year-old range. So we have our adults, we have our teenagers. The emerging adults are the ones who are coming to our academies. The emerging adults are the ones filing their first job application with the fire service and don't understand they're going to have to work weekends and nights as well. This is really kind of the parallel to our cognitive development where that prefrontal cortex is kind of still coming into place. They're not making the best decisions yet. They're trying their best to figure out, okay, I don't live with mom and dad anymore. What do I do? But more specifically, they're to the age they're not listening to the parents anymore. They're to the maturity they're not surviving on their own anymore. And now they're kind of given to the community to finish raising and socialize, if you will. And so this transition of human development as it pertains to the K through 12 system, that lands right on our doorstep. So we have to be aware of this and start preparing for this. And this is going to be kind of a correlation to the skills that we see that we expect our students to have when they come to us that they don't actually have. So with that said, are generations defined exclusively by the year you're born? What do you think?
No, not at all.
Absolutely. I was really enlightened when I started studying generations because I hate to admit it, I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial is my defense. I had an analog childhood with a digital college life, if you will. But I relate more to Gen X because I am the youngest of 3 kids. And so I'm at 81. I'm right there on the cusp. But I was raised in a Gen X mentality household. Not only that, I was raised in a rural environment. So information was slower to reach me than if I had lived in a city. We know peer influences are a huge influence on the mindset of how individuals develop their world perspective. We know that access and speed of information, if you don't know what's going on the bigger world and you're in this little cocoon, you tend to relate more to the older generations and styles. For instance, when I was a kid, living in a rural part of Missouri, the folks up the street who were my babysitters, they were from the early 1900s. 1904 and 1910 was when they were born. So as a kindergartner, going to their house after school, we would snap peas, we would go in the house, we'd do all the things, we'd wash the aluminum foil and put it back for use, and then I'd go home and play Nintendo. So I have that wide breadth of my generations, rather than if I had just lived in a very metro, fast access to information area. So what they're saying is, because of the speed of information having such a drastic impact on the actual definition of cohorts, the cohort banding is getting smaller. We're no longer really looking at 20 years. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and it's getting more isolated to geographic areas. So when we look at those stereotypes of people, it's not necessarily as simplistic as their birth years. It is for the major events of like the shuttle explosion, Kennedy, 9/11, those kind of things. But for the informational basis, that's redefining how we're processing generational information. So with that, the evolution of generational theory, we just kind of talked about that to some regard. Are generations linear? Do they go singularly from the top to the bottom? Does everyone go uniquely different than every generation that precedes it? Or do they kind of refer back to each other? What do you think? What do you know? Any ideas or guesses?
So are you asking if like Gen Z is built on the millennial, or if they're independent and just totally a unique creation?
To some regard, how do you feel about the interdependence, or is there an interdependence of the generations?
Well, Aaron, I know just from my perspective that my kids are both Gen Ys. I'm a baby. I'm at the end of the baby boomer. My wife's the beginning of the Gen X. But my kids, my grandkids are raised with the values that we instilled in our kids. So my grandsons, both of them, even though one of them is a Gen Zer and the other one is a Gen Alpha, they both have the same characteristics of the baby boomer / Gen X in how they carry themselves, how they speak, what they think, their work ethic, the whole work. So I think you get a lot of mix in depending on how you're raising kids and where you're at. Like depending on your background, how you're brought up is going to be dependent on how you raise your kids outside of other outside influences.
Yeah, and I would agree with that tremendously. What they have found historically, and when I say they, I'm specifically referring to Strauss and Howe. Strauss and Howe found there was some cyclical evolution to generations. And they related it a lot more to our global crisis schedule to some extent. And in their research, they determined on the relational scale that grandchildren and grandparents usually relate to each other better than the parent generation sandwiched in between them. And kind of the reason for that is, you have that teenager separation from your parents. A lot of folks that when they come out of their parents' household, they come into the marriage household, they determine, I'm not going to do what my parents did to me. I didn't like how I was parented. So they kind of do a 180. And then their kids are kind of like, I don't like what my parents did. And they kind of do a 180 as well. And so there's some attributes of flip-flopping between the generations in the cultures. Now that's just within the linear flow that we saw on the previous page. Strauss and Howe identified that with the concept, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, that about every 80 years, that older theory of generational band of 20 years, about 80 years, we have 4 different archetypes of generations. For instance, we have our folks who are in time of crisis, that they serve as the warriors. And if we're looking at like our GI, our we had the GIs, we had the war, and then we had our better time where we had our baby boomers. And then it kind of goes back and forth a little bit over that time. And so they call these different phases having economic highs, having social awakenings, having unraveling, and then having periods of crisis. Ironically, their first book, The Fourth Turning, was put out in the 70s. And their time of crisis was to hit in the early 2000s by their early projections of this. As we know, 2001 was definitely a time of crisis for us. And so it's an interesting theory where it says the generations are to some degree lineal, but there's a lot of cyclical implication into them. And we kind of see those as well as we move forward, that it's not just as easy as what year were you born in? Oh, you're a Gen Xer. So what is the impact of all of this on our state training agencies? Why does this matter to you guys? Why might this be interesting? We talked about a little bit earlier about having some conflict, but why do you guys care in your jobs?
We have to know how to communicate to them, how to reach them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done an informal poll as a part of my research. And what do you think some of the sentiments came back as? I asked, using the typical terms, tell me about these kids. What do these kids know? What do these old guys know? What were some of the sentiments you think I heard back in that poll? What's the commonly held chagrins?
The fire
One generation,
service. Go ahead.
just one generation not respecting another.
Yeah, very much so. Go ahead, Ken, or excuse me, Jim.
I think it's the same thing that I've heard when I came in, that the fire service is in a lot of trouble. These new kids don't have the same work ethic, or they didn't come from the trades, or they didn't come from the military, or they're not. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't understand these kids,
Yeah.
and we've got nothing but trouble in our future, and it's the same thing. And I think that probably happens every generation that comes in. The older generation has a concept that this is never going to work. They don't respect our traditions. They don't do things the way I do things. So they're all messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did they get that way? Anybody have a guess?
Which group? The group speaking or the group on the receiving end?
Either.
Well, I think that they both have different life experiences, so they're assessing or judging from their life experience compared to somebody else. And there's Beloit College puts out a story every year with the new freshmen on what they've never done that we always did. And it's like you give a dial phone to somebody today, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And it's the same thing.
That's a later slide, but I'll jump to that right now since you're referencing it. Yeah,
Okay.
so Beloit College in Michigan started with the class of 2002, and they've started doing a mindset list. And this is one of my recommendations of having to as an implication of what we can do to prepare for the future. So those are some of the mindset references for the current entering class of 2025 that will be graduating in 2029. And some of the references are: a speaker has always been the woman of a speaker. A woman has always been the Speaker of the U.S. House. Just to summarize some of these points, The Simpsons, Big Bang Theory, and Google is old. It's been around longer than they've been alive. The Harry Potter series has been concluded since they've been born. And so just kind of puts things in perspectives. Absolutely. I've included on this slide a tweet I painfully read this morning that the kids don't know what VCRs, landlines, or newspapers are. So yeah, thank you for referencing that, Jim. It's one of those things. And the question I have with this slide is, it's a pet project of mine, but what do you think the implication would be if we did this for the fire service? would there be value in creating a mindset list for fire service instructors to kind of keep perspective of where their folks come from? And if so,
I
contact
would
me.
say,
Go ahead,
I would
Jim.
say yes. I would say yes, because again, in some of the audience have heard me talk about it. You know, you hear from a younger generation of firefighter about the good old days when we rode
Mhm.
tailboard and how this was better and that was better. Well, I rode tailboard in Wisconsin, and it wasn't always a lot of fun. It was cold in the winter. You were frequently on the back tailboard there all by yourself as you rode out into the country for 20 minutes in the snow, in the rain, and you couldn't crawl up under the hose bed tarp or into the hose bed far enough to stay there. You know, and some of the audience I know, and we were talking about this recently, some of us wore red ball gloves and some of us wore 3/4 boots, and 3/4 boots look cool on TV, but you get burned a lot, especially when you're crawling on hot stuff. And long coats are clumsy and make movement difficult, and steel bottles suck. And I
So
don't mean the air that I'm breathing. So, you know, I think that, you know, I think that we have a generation that goes out to the pump panel and presses a button and gets a flow of water based on that versus running compound gauges and things like that. So
perfect segue for a slide I'm going to use next. Then I'm going to jump to this one because you guys are setting it up perfect. So what's the information that they need to know for us to respect them? Do we need to put them in 3/4 boots? Do we need to put them on the tailboard? Do they have to endure the same trauma we went through for us to respect them? What do you think? Do we have to teach them all the old ways? We spend time glorifying it. What do you think?
I don't think they need to know all the old ways. They need to know generically, in some ways, why we do what we do now.
Okay. So everybody knows has experienced probably calculating frictional loss based on counting your fingers. Do we need to teach them that if standard operating procedure now is to have a printed flow chart? What are the thoughts?
No, why would we?
Well, if the chart might not be there, right? So, and this is
They
a
can
discussion.
Google it.
They
Yeah.
can Google it if it's relevant to them. Are there times and places that information is no longer relevant to our firefighters? Who's familiar with that third picture there? What are we looking at there?
That's the SAM automatic pump management system.
Yeah. So with the SAM pump system, I was present at a department who will remain nameless to protect the guilty when they were bringing in new Rosenbauer rigs with SAM's pumping systems. They were doing their initial training to their firefighters, and the training was boop, boop. That's all you need to know. And when the apparatus operators were asking questions, like, nope, boop, boop is all you need to know. And so finally, there was someone who dug in deep enough, and their administration said, oh, well, yeah, if you open the panel, there's some manual overrides, all the stuff's there, but we don't want you to do that. If boop, boop doesn't work, call the rig out of service and call for a new apparatus. What do you guys think about that?
So what if boop boop doesn't work while you've got guys stretched 200 feet inside a warehouse?
Again, the department will remain nameless to protect the guilty. Didn't sit comfortable, but that's what some folks are going to. And so, again, we have folks who, as we see comment of what the old guys typically do, some of the things is next to last, that they don't want to learn new ways. They're unwilling to interact and teach the old or adapt to the new ways. Those kind of things are the sentiments. So we have a lot of instructors who are still requiring to teach this method. And then we have administrations and other folks who are on the extreme end trying to oversimplify the fire service. Do either of these extremes solve the problems we need to solve?
No, here's my opinion is the newer generation needs to know where they got all this information from. We don't necessarily, we need to maybe refresh it, or review it with them or something, but they need to know how they got to where they are now.
Mhm. I agree. On this slide, I want to follow this up somewhere. There's a quote that says you can tell them they won't believe anything you tell them until they Google it. Oh, yes, fourth from the bottom. So is this something that on the job they would be able to Google? Or is this something that they need to memorize to do their job? What do you think? The hand method.
Just Google it so that way, they can figure out the history all on their own, but we don't need to necessarily have them do it that way.
Yeah, I would agree entirely. And so when we go through and we're kind of merging the two sections together about the impact of the generations and strategy for integration, as we look at these things, in my experience, sometimes we wait until the new standard to update our curriculum and our testing. And the challenge with that is we keep following that same model and we don't integrate what's the fast moving information we have access to. So sometimes is the information we want them to know, the why, as testable content as it was 20 years ago. What's the impact when we make them memorize things that is just for the written test? And this is an opinion piece. There's no right or wrong. I'm curious what you folks think.
They memorize it for the test, but if they don't use it on a regular basis, it's gone.
Absolutely. And a lot of times we've tried to adapt our testing methods. We've gone from the paper method to digital method, but it's still multiple choice, correct? For the largest part, in addition to our skills testing.
Yes.
So when they memorize it for the test and they take the test, we also run the challenge of having the misinformation effect. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Nope.
Okay, misinformation effect is an interesting little thing. We all experience it, but at the same time, we don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's more prevalent in court cases where you have witness testimony. And that's why grilling of witnesses is so important, because when people remember something, they're not remembering the event that happened, they're remembering the most recent recollection of it. So then when they recall it later, they're recalling a newer version that they've accessed, rewritten, and put back in their brain. It's subject to prompting and a lot of influence. For the sake of testing, when we do multiple choice testing, we're trying to assess, can they recognize the right answer and select it? The danger of the misinformation effect is, while they take our multiple choice test, when they don't have a correlation or a correction of the information they got wrong, when they go through and they select the wrong answers, that now gets imprinted into their brain as the new correct answer. So sometimes when we're doing the testing methods to validate learning, we actually are setting back their long-term knowledge retention. It's kind of interesting. You might look into it a little bit more. But going back to the generational concept, what is it, the problems that we have? We've kind of talked about that before. Of what do these kids not know that we expect them to know?
I think everything you've got on that list at one time or another has been identified as these kids don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are our current millennials. The next generation will have other skill sets that are missing. And why is that? Why are we losing skills instead of getting more competent students into our academies?
We're not losing skills, we're losing specific skills. They have other skills that
Yes.
potentially make them more valuable or valuable in different ways.
Oh, absolutely. Because our society is changing, their skill set is changing also. So just as you said perfectly, they're having stronger skill sets that we who have been doing the job for the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years haven't had the opportunity to develop. So they're bringing in more health consciousness. They're bringing in more safety consciousness. They're bringing in more technology and adaptability. They're kind of bringing into the fire service what we for a long time have struggled with, which is our interpersonal dynamics and our HR sensitivity. If stop me if the stereotype doesn't pertain, but in the fire service, we used to have the clause that, you know, if, oh, it's I'm picking on you because I'm showing you my love and those kind of things. Our newer generations have already had some social training that our older generations haven't had. So they're coming and they're expecting managers to be leaders. They're expecting folks to set up a psychologically safe environment. They're expecting to have a work-life balance. They're expecting to do all these things that maybe we degrade them for because we resent we didn't have those opportunities, and that we're maybe having tougher times adapting to implementing ourselves. And so with that, when we're running our academies, not just our students and our instructors, we have to work with them to try to establish that common picture. It used to be when we talked about generations, we were just getting ready for a generation. We just, oh, generation X is here. We got to get ready for them. What changes do we need to make? Oh, generation Y is coming, 10, 20 years later. What changes do we need to make? And as we looked at with that mindset list, we need to develop a process where every year we're adapting, we're reassessing for skill gaps, we're reassessing for knowledge gaps, we're assessing for skill strengths, we're assessing for knowledge strengths, and we're becoming a much more adaptive machine. And we're building a culture of adaptability instead of just a hard and fast reorient for a new generation, then reorient for the next generation. Any thoughts on that? Okay, well, I'm trying to be mindful of time. I think I'm right at the end of it. So question to you guys. Has there been anything you've heard today or any thoughts that you've taken away that are applicable to you going forward? Or is there something that can help you further in the discussion? Or do you have a specific issue that we haven't hit on that you'd like to throw out to the group?
Erin, I have one question. Or as an observation. So you had talked about the emerging adult, which was kind of a new concept. And if I'm thinking back several years ago, I know there was a big focus on entry-level firefighters coming in, not able to read at a certain level. And that was kind of like not only a fire service, but that was kind of like a societal issue. And it seems like, that became prevalent enough that we responded to it, supportive training, the schools did a better job. Now with new learning methods, I don't hear that to be the same level of concern as I did, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. But with this emerging adult issue, I've heard stories of people applying for jobs and they don't have a driver's license. And they're asked, how did you get here? And they said, well, my parents drove me. Well, how will you get to work? My parents will drive me and pick me up. And you mentioned about they're not fully matured and they're coming into the academy with expectation of learning the fire service and the team concept and all of those things. And it's a whole new thing. So is there anything that talks about what are the top 3 gaps in those emerging adults when they come into a structured learning program like an academy that need to be addressed, that the research shows these are the top 3 critical gaps that you ought to be looking at?
I think that's a great question. And again, it's case by case basis. Like Greg described on his grandkids, and like I have some nephews who are absolutely amazing. My parents have helped raise them, so they're working on motors at 15. They're farming and all this other kind of stuff. We've got folks who are coming in who are still super capable, but we do have, as you described, those individuals who have no life coping skills. And so it's very easy to resent them, but it's one of the big issues is when they come in, we have to look at the whole person. It's not just come to the fire service, have a career here. If we want folks to come to the fire service and participate in a career, we now have to take them as that emergent adult and finish raising them. They may have no financial literacy. They may not have a checking account. And we may have to tell them, hey, dude, you're here, take the 401k option. we're going to have to mentor them in ways we didn't normally have to mentor them. This slide that I'm showing you now, meet them where they are. When I started my doctoral studies, I started with the University of Missouri when I worked there in educational psychology. In this group, it is folks who are aspiring to be K through 12 educators, superintendents, principals. And the overarching mantra that I heard in several classes by several very high influence people was not dispelling the credibility of Angela Duckworth's research on grit, but dispelling the relevance in education. There was a very large movement there, which is one of the reasons I left the program, a very large movement towards not instilling grit in our students. Grit is an educator is a bad word. We don't want to do that. No grit for our students. In the fire service, do we want our people to have grit?
Absolutely.
How do you feel about our K through 12 system dispelling grit from our students' experience?
I think it challenges us as the fire service, because they're used to not having to work very hard to achieve their goal.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg. I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, Ken mentioned about the reading issue. We're seeing an uptick in that. We are reading more tests to students. We're approving more ADA accommodations than we ever did over the last 15 years. These last 5 years, it's just, I mean, I just approved like 10 of them this week for new kids coming through programs. So we're still seeing a huge reading disconnect in the state of Missouri.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. And I know that starts in the K through 12 system. So
yeah. So with the K through,
we've really had a problem with our EMT program because of the reading levels. One of the books are written at an 8th grade level. That's what they're letting them graduate at. But the National Registry test is written at an 11th grade level. And they just cannot comprehend the questions the way they're written at that higher level.
So when our written test is written in a way that students who can do the job, okay, but can't pass the written test because there's not a written test on the job, right? What's the concern with that for us besides our pass rates? What's a federal concern with that?
A federal concern?
A federal concern.
Are you referring to like an ADA complaint?
Yeah, like EEOC Title VII. Are you folks familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure you are, but the disparate treatment clause. So if they can do the job, but they can't pass the test, it hasn't been challenged in the fire service, but I feel comfortable talking with you guys here. This is a friendly group. It hasn't been challenged in the fire service, but there are those that are concerned that if a protected class raises this complaint, that then under EEOC Title VII, they can claim a disparate action. Now, we make accommodations as much as we can, but just as you guys said, we have that shift between where we're meeting our students and where the testing is, especially with National Registry, where we have no control over that. But those are concerns that we need to be aware of going forward. Now, under the federal IDEA Act, I was reviewing data on that earlier, and roughly 9 to 23% of each state is indicating that in the K through 12 environment, there is a specific learning disability recognized in that percentage of students. And where I think this comes into play, where the students coming through K through 12 having different skill sets than we want them, is that kind of that example of grit. The reason that they're not promoting grit development in their students is because in order to develop grit, you must expose your students to micro traumas. And we can't have that. I'm not joking at all. So there's a level of rigor in the K through 12 environment that's getting washed out of the system. And our students, by that nature, are going to their social media, they're going to micro learning, they're transitioning, just as we know, they're transitioning from becoming active drivers and homeowners. One, they're not driving, so we have to teach them that skill. Not being a homeowner means they're not developing those mechanical home maintenance, property maintenance skills as well. Well, now they're spending their time in the digital environments, And that's reprogramming their brains as well. No longer do we have the focus and concentration. We don't have the reading for comprehension or the reading. Now our learning comes in 15 to 30-second segments. We get our dopamine and we move on. And that chemically and physically restructures the brains of our students also. So we can't just throw them into a classroom, sit them in front of a PowerPoint for 40 hours and expect them to be productive. They physically and mentally haven't been trained to do so. Thoughts, concerns? To go back to your question, what are the high level things? We need them to, on a student by student basis, assess that. We're gonna have folks who come in who are avid readers. We're gonna have folks who come in and due to confidence bias think they're great readers that can barely read the cereal box. And it's something that as instructors, it's gonna be added to our plate to start doing these assessments when we receive our students into our classrooms. Sorry, I feel like that's a little bleak. Any other
No,
questions?
Well,
that was
I would also say that we have some of the most intelligent people that we've ever had. They have, and you just showed the phone.
Mhm.
They have the most information available to them 24/7 all the time. And AI is going to make that even more. They're going to just ask questions and the answer is going to come out of the sky.
So going back to, that reminds me of a quote that I didn't show you. Going back to the pump and operations. One of the quotes from the survey I thought was really hilarious was an older respondent said, they need to know water doesn't magically appear out of the pump because you asked the computer. We're getting to that point that it does happen. And so from an academy point of view, from a testing and training point of view, that's one of those moving things that we need to be aware of too, of what on the fire scene should they be going to Google for? What is discretionary time information that they are going to have those endless resources available to? And if on the fire scene, they're going to have those resources with them, do we really need to waste the time making them memorize it for the test? Can we focus on more important things for our testing process, the non-discretionary information? Yeah, great observation, Jim.
Again, we're on the cusp of immersive information in our SCBA, glasses that can give us information, could show us a pre-plan, you're talking about the SAM system. It won't be long before the SAM system is reading us information on our face piece. I'm watching the university play with stuff like that all the time now, and I think that what we're frustrated with is this isn't the way we were brought up, and this isn't the way that we got to where we are. And I think that we have to be more open in our thinking.
Yeah. Even though we went before them, and even though we survived to this point, we're still catching up. We're all, regardless of generation, we're all on the bleeding edge of technology. We're all on the bleeding edge of science. We're all on the bleeding edge of technique. And we all have the opportunity to get better together. I think that's a great takeaway.
And the last example that I'm going to throw out at you is that I can remember Mr. Davis and Mr. Whelan telling us how we had to learn how to do this math because we're never going to have a calculator with us all the time. And look at us now.
Yep.
It's plastered to my wrist all day long, and it does more advanced math than I ever wanted to do.
Absolutely. Great point. I share that with you entirely. Thank you guys for your time. I know I'm a little bit over my time, so I'll give you your meeting time back. If you want to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. And thank you guys tremendously.
Great presentation.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
What are the names of the dogs?
So those were my search and rescue dogs. Going from left to right, the yellow one is Teddy 10 Speed. The middle one is Mighty Mizzou, Shepherd's Moon Mighty Mizzou. And all the way over to the right, the blue one is Cutter, Cutthroat Kid. They're all 3 type 1 USAR dogs. They have all since passed away, but they're my kids.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for the presentation, Erin, and thanks for
Thank you.
sharing your information so folks can follow up with you. Before we conclude, I just have a few wrap-up items that I'd like to run to the membership. First of all, FDIC, I put an email out. We are going to have the same offer from Clarion for this year's FDIC. Each NAFTD member will be able to request 2 complimentary registrations. You will register them through a dedicated website that Clarion will provide a link for. I do not have the link yet, so please do not register on any of the pre-registration websites now. Wait until I send you the link from Clarion so we can get registered according to the system they set up for us. I'm waiting to hear confirmation of a room block, and as soon as I have that, I'll share that information. And our meeting will take place April 22nd. It'll be an all-day meeting, and folks who take advantage of the complimentary registrations should attend the NAFTD meeting. Following up on our conference, the videos of the individual presentations are being assembled. I will share links to those when they're available. For those who attended, the pictures are also, they've been uploaded to a shared drive. I'm trying to get those in a way that I can easily share them with folks. Next year's conference, 2026, will be in Louisiana. It will be September 21st to 24th. So mark your calendars now. The year following that, we will be in Kansas. And the year following that, we will be in Delaware. The administrative survey that we sent out, so to date, we've only had less than 50% of our membership respond. I will be resending the link. Michelle Royal is available to sit with you via phone or Zoom to go over the survey. If you find that you're finding a stumbling block, please complete the survey. We are trying to establish a database of relevant and current information and lay the framework for being able to do this on a recurring basis in an easier manner. So your participation this year is critical. Please complete the survey. And lastly, I am completing the billing for our annual dues and for conference registrations. With everything else that was on my plate at the time, that got kind of pushed aside. But you will, if I have not already billed you or you have not already paid those fees, those invoices will be coming. And if there's any questions, as always, I'm available. Please reach out to me. And with that, Jim, do you have any closeout comments?
Erin, thank you so much. I enjoyed the discussion. I hope everybody did, and I look forward to next month's meeting.
All right, and that will be November. I just had the date in front of me. November. Where'd the date go? Well, it's the first Thursday in November, so please mark your calendar, and I'll be sending out a notice and who will be our presenter for that day.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks all. And let's hope the federal government reopens soon.
Thanks, Ken.
Have a great Halloween.
Take care, everyone.